the more you talk about it and just the more that I'm looking at these numbers in front of me, I'm just like, I know the Bucs are favored by a field goal, but I just think the Commanders are the better team. All right, guys, back with the Establish the Pass podcast presented by Clutch Points. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dillon Reagan, here to make our picks for the wild card round in the NFL. Dillon, some interesting matchups, as we know. Always fascinating to see these point spreads on these games in the wild card round. Of course, kind of a unique scenario this year where you've got some of these really just high-win teams that are going to be playing on the road. That's how it works sometimes, we know, based on who wins the division and all that. So, some good matchups we're set up for here in the wild card round.
Yeah, super excited for these games to get going. Obviously, tonight, I believe this podcast will be coming out today. Tonight we'll have the college football playoff starting. Then we'll get right into these. It's going to be a fun 5 days in a row we get of games. That interesting with the AFC all going in a row before the NFC wild card starts with the timing of these. But kind of like we talked about in some of the previous episodes, an AFC field that maybe seems a little more condensed. Whereas, some of these NFC games, as we talk about them, a little more wide open. Even Packers Eagles, which that's the biggest favorite of the three, right? But nonetheless, still a game that some of the DVOA numbers are going to show it could be a pretty close one.
Yep. So here we go. Let's jump into it. All these odds in these games we discuss via DraftKings. So let's start with the Chargers at the Texans. The Chargers are going to be 3-point favorites on the road in this one, Dillon. And of course, the Chargers kind of, this season maybe exceeded expectations a little bit. Meanwhile, not surprised to see the Texans get into the playoffs, but it does feel like they're sort of one of those teams that maybe not in the best spot sitting here right now, which if you're looking at the odds, they are 3-point underdogs at home here in this AFC showdown.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at kind of total DVOA numbers, Houston a little bit better, but man, it's been kind of a rough go. If you look at weighted DVOA that kind of takes into account what you've done recently, they're down at 17th versus a Chargers team at 7th. That's why the spot was so coveted, right? With the way that we saw, unlike in the NFC side where seeding wasn't as huge of a deal, we had Mariota playing for the Commanders at times, obviously the Rams resting starters. That was not the case for the Steelers, even though they knew they hadn't won after they knew they'd lost the division, they were still fighting hard against the Bengals to try to get that 5 seed. And then the Chargers, the same thing the next day against the Raiders. So they get rewarded with this matchup that, versus the difference between what Houston looks like and Baltimore at this point in time could not be bigger. And it's just as much as the Houston defense has been really good throughout the season, I think the Chargers are just a more well-rounded team, right? It feels like with the way that they're able to control things a little bit more on defense, how they've been able to still utilize the obvious skill that Justin Herbert has without as many dangerous plays, or even at times where you worry about him being a little too cautious. It seems like they're kind of towing that ground much better now than in previous years. Even though the run DVOA isn't great, they still, when we've watched it, they've looked a lot better when they've been healthy in their backfield, and with Dobbins and now Edwards both supposed to be able to play here. You saw, I'm sure, that they picked up Zeke. Not sure if that's more of just a backup option for the Chargers, but nonetheless, just a better team. The DVOA projections right now have them favored by a little over 4 points with their odds where they see this. It's frustrating for Houston because, again, we talked about this ad nauseum, but if you told us they're going to have a top 5 defense, I'm thinking Super Bowl contender. Instead, we're like, oh, this is the matchup you really want. So not a totally hard pick to go with the Chargers to get the first playoff win of the Jim Harbaugh era. But, Houston, obviously last year, a very different offensive team with how Stroud looked as well. But we saw that defense make a ton of plays. Maybe they'll rally again and at least keep this one close. Hopefully we get a solid game to open the slate. Always Houston, fortunately, getting that first Saturday afternoon kickoff. It's a tradition unlike any other Houston Invitational now.
I was going to say, it is every single time. And you're just like, well, it's the Texans. If they're in the playoffs, we know where they're playing. Yep. No doubt about it. I'm going with the Chargers too. I think they have certainly a bit more momentum right now than the Texans. Probably, would not have thought that'd be my pick here in this one, a while back. But I just think it's a tough spot for the Texans here, just given the matchup and what we've seen the Chargers do well. So, yeah, I'll go with the Chargers too. What could go wrong, Dillon? Both of us picking the Chargers on the road in the playoffs to pick up a big win. But they are the favorites, so not that big of an upset here. This one would be the biggest upset of this round based on the number, as the Steelers are on the road in Baltimore to play the Ravens. Ravens are 9.5-point favorites in this game, Dylan. That's a big number between these two teams. But, of course, the two AFC North rivals going to clash here. But, this number, I can't say was that surprising. But when you look at it, it's an interesting one for these two teams here in this one.
Yeah, obviously Baltimore, did lose to Pittsburgh their first matchup of the season. And even though they won by a few scores on that game the Saturday before Christmas, it ended up being, a lot closer till Russell Wilson's pick six. So Steelers have found ways to give problems to Baltimore over the years, even when obviously for a lot of that rivalry, the balance of power was pretty even. I obviously slanted talent wise to what Baltimore has now, but I think it's the Ravens defense too that kind of separates it. It's not just that they have the number one DVOA offense, both running and throwing the ball, and all these record-breaking numbers that Lamar has, first QB, with the amount of rushing yards and passing yards in one season, all the limiting the turnovers, it's ridiculous. But this Baltimore defense has really come along after, not the best start to the year. They finished at 6th in DVOA. I'm sure the weighted numbers would put them higher. For a team that is in the 3 seed, I mean, historically, they're one of the better 3 seeds DVOA-wise there's ever been. They are with the weighted numbers that kind of look at the later results being more impactful. Baltimore is clearly the number one in the entire NFL. So above Philly, above Detroit, all these other teams. So it's that it represents that. And then at the bottom end of this playoff field, it's Houston at 14th, and then Pittsburgh at 13th with some of these numbers. So it is a mismatch in those ways, but turnovers will definitely be, if there's going to be a way for Pittsburgh to get this one done, they're going to have to force turnovers. I really don't see any other way for them to, they're going to have to steal some possessions. Otherwise, even if their defense can somewhat slow Lamar, it's just the other side. That's where, the offense, especially at times, really frustrating. Even when Russell was throwing some great passes against the Bengals, some big drops from Pickens, even Freiermuth had one on that 4th down right at the end. It just seems like a team that had, took their best shot early in the season, maybe peaked a little early, but also as a reflection, as we've talked about, of just a really hard second half of the season schedule. Their first half, second half schedule is dramatically different. Even though they're a good football team, Baltimore is a great one. So yeah, the Ravens were an easy pick. And if I had to pick on the spread, I picked them to cover. They're a little over 12-point DVOA projection favorite, which is a really large gap for a playoff game here.
Yeah, and I think playoffs, too, always about getting off to a good start. And I thought an interesting stat, Dylan, the Steelers 32nd in the NFL in first quarter points allowed. So that's the average 6.6 that they're basically, allowing a touchdown, or at least the number that is in the first quarter, which if you get off to a bad start against the Ravens, I don't like the way that sets up here in this matchup. So, yes, I'm also picking the Ravens in this one, not going with the almost double-digit upset here in that matchup. All right, this one's just close. It's close to that. The Broncos are at the Bills. The Bills 8.5-point favorites against the Broncos. We know the Broncos, kind of a team that came out of, I don't want to say nowhere a little bit, but certainly exceeded expectations this season. Another one of those AFC West teams that has done that. And now your reward is that you get to go play this Bills team that is, again, just looking the part of a Super Bowl champion right now. It's just a matter of, can they get there? And so another matchup here, Dylan, where it seems to be heavily slanted in the home team's favor here.
Yeah, looking at the weather too, snow on the forecast for a lot of the next week, although precipitation only 20% on Sunday. So maybe they'll get away from it, and, pretty overall weather condition between 31, 28 degrees, not bad. So I don't think the conditions, I'd almost think if you're Denver, you'd want it to get a little sloppier with the way that we've seen Josh Allen and this offense perform. Obviously that hasn't always been an issue for this team, but I think this is a little closer matchup than the last one, at least with some of the ways that you look at the way how these two teams match up. Denver's defense has been really good, and they've defended play action well. They defended drop back. Their passing defense DVOA 5th. So at least present some problems on that side, where if this game does get a little dicey late, I think it is going to be largely because they've been able to force Buffalo's offense to punt the football and not get all the long drives we're kind of used to seeing. It's the flip side, though. Not that Buffalo's defense has been perfect, but you do wonder about this Broncos offense, how they're going to be able to maintain in those elements and the conditions. You've probably seen the stats about the last rookie quarterback to win a road playoff game, being Russell Wilson in 2012. It's been, I think, 7 or 8 straight rookie road playoff games that have ended in defeats. There's only 3 all time. It's Joe Flacco. I forget the third one, and then Russell. So I mean, a lot of times rookies maybe winning at home, but on the road in the playoffs for your first start. So it's much as Mark Sanchez is the other one, but nonetheless, tougher sledding here. I think ultimately this Buffalo team, I think the 2 seed is warranted. Easily could have been the 1 if a couple things went their way. Obviously, they weren't playing their guys there in that last game. If they were, I think this is more of a representative of a 14-3 football team. And for all the things that Denver does, it's just they're not quite there in terms of the talent level. Yeah, closer DVOA projection, a little over 7-point favorite for Buffalo compared to that 12-point Baltimore one. So you're looking at those numbers, and it's not as crazy of a difference, but still Buffalo up there as right now one of the best teams in the league. Obviously, no reason to think that they're not going to be able to take care of business. I just think there's a chance that this was a little closer game. And if I'm picking on the spread, I'm probably going with Denver to cover, because I could see a 7-8 point win for Buffalo being right around where I think it'd go. Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? What are you waiting for? You better get on it. The playoffs are here and his time is running out. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. You can play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's really easy to get started. Select 2 or more players, choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, and you're done. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code ESTABLISH. That's code ESTABLISH for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Yeah, the numbers suggest that too. The Broncos are 12-5 against the spread this season. So Buffalo's 10-7, so not bad, but Broncos have been pretty good at that. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm going to pick the Bills, but I think I wouldn't be shocked if Denver finds a way to make this closer than that number for the reasons that you mentioned. So, all right, so that's another of the bigger spreads. Now we get to the ones in the NFC where, these are certainly a little bit smaller than that. The Packers are at the Eagles. The Eagles are 4.5-point favorites in this game. And again, you just look at the way the Eagles have played. They have kind of just been a machine at times. Meanwhile, the Packers, it seems like, Dylan, they're still really good. It's just they happen to maybe not get the same attention that the Lions and the Vikings have at times in that division. But I mean, this, I think going into it, like this kind of had a similar feel to an NFC Championship type game. It's going to be played in the wild card round, which is not ideal for the Packers here, as they are the ones hitting the road and heading to Philadelphia.
And the NFC is a gauntlet. It is, as we've talked about, every game feels like it could go either way. And even as we continue to advance past this round, looking ahead, obviously the Lions, really impressive what they did, but it just feels like it's a more wide open field than that top 3 and maybe even 4 if you include the Chargers and the AFC side. But yeah, this the total DVOA numbers tell that story. These are both top 5 teams. Even when you look at one of my favorite ones they put together was weighted DVOA with the Week 18 adjustment, which helps with a game like Denver and the Chiefs that made with the normal DVOA numbers made the Broncos look like one of the best teams of all time. Obviously, when you take into account the starters being out for Kansas City, a little bit different. And similar thing there, though, here with Philly's starters being out, the weighted DVOA takes into account, again, the second half of the season, a little more recent games. And yeah, Philly at second in the league, Green Bay at 4th, only behind Baltimore at 1st and Detroit at 3rd. So, I mean, at least the recent, that's telling us that recently these are 2 of the best 4 kind of teams from those numbers. And the matchup man, it's a tough one for Green Bay because the spine of their defense, as we know, and some of the pass rush things have been a concern. Kind of the ways you can mitigate what the Eagles want to do, and especially up the middle. I just feel like this is a Saquon dominant performance that's going to just come for us. You're going to really need for the Packers to make this a game, in my opinion, Jordan Love to kind of find what he found last season. We haven't seen maybe the flashes, even the games where Green Bay has won handedly. We've seen the ground game kind of becoming a dominant part of their offense. They're still third in passing DVOA in the league, but again, that's maybe a little more. The second half of the season isn't quite as strong as the more recent games. Their explosive rate is still really high, and we did see that when these teams played. Obviously, that was a long time ago. First of all, that was in Brazil, but that field played a big role with a lot of defenders slipping and whatnot, right? So it's a game that Philadelphia, I think, just ultimately that defense is so strong for everything that Green Bay has done well in offense. I just have a hard time seeing them getting things completely going there. I wanted to feel, we talked about with DJ a couple weeks ago, some of these teams that are in the wild card area that we think could make a run at it. And I still think Green Bay is capable if they can find a way to get through this one. DVOA numbers have them only a 2.4 point underdog to Philly. So they really do think they're quite right there. But I just think Philadelphia's too strong for me to look at, what they've done over the course of this entire season to pick against them. So I'm going to go with the Eagles getting the win, but maybe we'll see Jordan Love and that offense do. I don't think we're going to see what they did to Dallas last season, but we haven't quite seen those kind of breakout games. If it's going to happen, it needs to happen now because I think this might be one of their toughest tests. Obviously, they play the Lions if they win, but nonetheless, playing in that environment in Philadelphia, it makes it a lot rougher, and that's why you're really, if you're a Packer fan, hoping, I think, for that 6th seed if you could have grabbed it with some of the way that things went down in Week 18.
Yeah, well, I know I picked the Packers to make the Super Bowl, but man, this is just a tough way to start the playoffs, and so I'm going to pick the Eagles too in this one. I just think it's a tough matchup on the road. Philly 8-1 at home this season, and I think it could be kind of the defense could be the story here for me, just to see. Maybe the Eagles are able just to make a few more plays with that, and maybe that's the difference here. So I'm going to pick the Eagles too. And Dylan, there goes one half of my Super Bowl picks already. So on to the next one. Didn't pick either of these to make the Super Bowl. But Commanders at the Bucks. The Bucks are the 3-point favorites at home. In this one, these two, if you remember, are meeting now after meeting to start the season. Yep. They played the season opener there in Tampa. Now they'll do the same here in the playoffs. Much more on the line, as we know. Commanders have kind of been one of the surprises of the season. Meanwhile, to some people, the Bucs may also have been a little bit of a surprise with how well they have played at times too, Dylan. So I like this matchup. I think this is one that could be a lot of fun given the way that these two teams seemingly like to play.
Yeah, I think there's a chance for a lot of big plays in this one. One of the worst explosive run defenses in the league is Washington, and Tampa Bay. Even if we haven't really always thought of them as a dominant running team, but really this season did take some good strides with Liam Cohen and that attack. Finished 5th in explosive run rate. So I mean, there's a chance that they're going to see not just the big plays through the air, which we've also seen Washington give up quite a few on. It's a fun game. If you don't have if you don't have a dog in the fight, like these two teams, it's just a great matchup. Excited to see what, talked about the rookie QB on the road thing. I think, obviously, as I'm going to actually pick the Commanders here, I think that Jane Daniels has a better chance to be the 4th rookie to win a road playoff game in the Super Bowl era. It's not so much that Tampa Bay, I still could see them coming out and playing really well. And we've seen these kind of games week to week where they'll fluctuate between, it being a bit rough and then a dominant performance. But I really do think that there's a chance for Washington's offense to do some good things against Tampa's defense. That last game, they obviously in the second half turned it around, but it really felt like the Saints left some plays on the field and against a team like Washington, what Jaden's done. And it just feels like, as we've talked about all year, when things get kind of crazy and there's a lot of pressure on, he seems to elevate, and he's so calm for a rookie. And I think in this way, against the 23rd pass defense DVOA team, Washington a top 10 offense on that side, there's a chance for them to make some plays. And I still think Tampa's going to put up points, right? Like this is a game that I think if Washington's going to win, they're going to be, probably needing to score around 30, I'd guess, or at least close to it. And I just think that they're capable of it. Tampa likes the blitz. Washington's been great throwing against the blitz. It's just a tough team to defend for a number of reasons, and it's why even we'll get to the Rams-Vikings game in a second. But like, as much as obviously the Vikings have a better record than Washington, it still is scary to try to defend the skill set that Jaden Daniels has, and so many different answers he has to the questions on the test every week. So should be a lot of fun. I'm glad that this game got a Sunday night billing, because initially when the matchups were kind of coming together, I was worried this was going to just be like the first game on Sunday, or they're going to kind of put it in a spot that wasn't as prime time. I think this is a worthy primetime matchup with the way these offenses have looked, and it should be a really fun one.
All right, so Dylan's probably not seeing this, but I have decided to flip my pick on this game. And
yes.
so that we do have one different, I've decided to flip my pick on the next game we're going to talk about to try to accommodate that. But the more you talk about it, and just the more that I'm looking at these numbers in front of me, I'm just like, I know the Bucs are favored by a field goal, but I just think the Commanders are the better team. So I'm going to pick them in this one. Again, I think the offensive is what's going to stand out to me. And, the Bucs have been more consistent at times maybe than we thought they'd be, but there's still been some of those where we're like, oh boy, not sure about. And I think especially it is like a matchup like this, and give me Jaden Daniels. I don't want to doubt my guy Baker Mayfield, but I think I'm going to take Jaden Daniels and the Commanders to win this one on the road. It's just, again, it is one of those tough things where, like, you're going on the road, you feel like the better team, Bucs are favored, all that, but I don't know. I like the Commanders maybe in this spot. All right, that does leave us with the Vikings at the Rams. Vikings favored by 1.5 here in this one. Again, everything going on in LA. Dylan, I know, the expectation now is that the game will be played as is. I know they've talked about Glendale is the alternate option. Yeah. So that's kind of the story right now, but certainly that would have a bit of an impact if that's the case. But if you just look at this game on the surface here, like we said, the Vikings are on the road in this one, but they have just been the better team this year, as we know, in that NFC North. So what stands out for you in this big matchup here for your Rams? What stands out is we need the offense to figure some things out, because it's been inconsistent is putting it slightly. Like the Rams overall finished, I think, 10th in offensive DVOA. But if you watch the last few weeks, they're winning games, but it was a slog at different times. I do think though that week of, even if it ends up leaving you obviously a seed lower, playing a team, Minnesota, that obviously with their record is a tough opponent. Yes, they did beat them early in the season, but a lot of different things. TJ Hawkinson wasn't playing. Some guys on defense from Minnesota weren't playing in that one. It's a game that I saw a report that they were scrambling the Vikings to kind of prepare for Puka. He'd just been activated for that 21-day practice window and then came back on a short week. So they weren't exactly, they probably should have been, but they weren't exactly ready for him to be in there. So, but it's just Stafford and this team that I do think that week off is really going to make a difference for, they had the really early bye week in week 6. It looked like a tired team, more so than just a offense that was completely not there. Like, they were still getting drives, they just weren't finishing. And red zone offense has been an issue for both these teams. That is something that sticks out for this game. These are two teams that are frustrating when they get inside the 20-yard line, which is not something, again, I always talk about Kevin O'Connell, what he did with the Rams red zone offense years ago as offense coordinator. It's been a struggle, and obviously what Detroit did on defense is a big part of that. And I don't think the Rams have the back end guys that can maybe necessarily do the exact same things, but this defense has come together. It's been a much better unit later in the season than it was early. The pass rush and the things that can get disrupt it maybe isn't the worst matchup for them. And it is
this is the second game of back-to-back where the underdog, at least in weighted DVOA with that Week 18 adjustment, is actually the higher up team. Despite their great record, Minnesota is a few spots, 3 spots below the Rams in weighted DVOA for the whole season. Washington also above Tampa in that metric. It's really the offense when you look at it for Minnesota that puts them down there. I think the only teams in the playoffs that are above them are Pittsburgh, Houston, and Denver. So it's not exactly a group where you saw the frustrating moments. Even though Sam Darnold's been really good this year, it's still not like this has been a dominant offensive unit. They've really relied on that defense to be their big kind of factor. The Rams have some, on defense, some issues defending the run at times, and it's the 20th run offense in the league. I know Aaron Jones is explosive, and there's been some good things, but overall, it still isn't efficiency-wise one of those units that's going to scare you the same way as some of these other ones. So I'm still stuck with the Vikings because I do think there's something about, they're still 14-3. Even though they lost to the Rams early in the year, I think they're going to come into this one well prepared. Their EPA per play on defense is just staggeringly good. And even with the rest, I think it does benefit the Rams, right? But I do think it's just going to be a rough game for them to come against this Vikings team with the way that they're going to be, playing fired up from last week. I still think that it could come right down to the wire. DVOA does have the Rams as about a 1-point favorite with their projection, despite being the underdog here. And like you said, with the fire, I read Sam Farmer, I believe, said with the LA Times, the contingency plans, every stadium, I guess, has them. So they're just reporting on like the one that was already in place for here. And we'll see. Obviously, things can change quickly, but at least where their practice facility is, the wind, the air quality is significantly better than it was already earlier in the week. And the fact that it's Monday night maybe gives them a little more time, but you just never know if there's going to be another fire that comes up. So, that would play a role in this. It'd be a really wild. I'm not sure what the atmosphere would be like in Arizona if the game were to be moved there. But either way, it should be a fun one. I'll go with the Vikings getting a close win, but I could see this really going either way. I think it kind of comes down to really the Rams offense finding that gear that we have seen when they played the Vikings earlier in the year, when they played the Bills. If they find that, then I do think they would probably be the winner. I believe it when I see it, I guess. And against the Minnesota defense that even if Sean McVay has dedicated a lot of time trying to figure out, Brian Flores was obviously part of that Patriots team that beat the Rams in Super Bowl 53 and really caused so many issues for the Rams offense. They've evolved so much from then. I think they have more answers to the test. It's just a matter of how clean is the operation going to be for that Rams offense.
Well, I'm gonna bank on the offense being good because I'm gonna pick the Rams in this one, and it's my theme. I feel like this season has been picking against the Vikings. It's not worked well, but I haven't done it all the time. But I just think this is one where, there's something about the Rams maybe for me just in this spot. Even though, again, you certainly look at what the Vikings have accomplished this year, and only favored by a point, maybe a point and a half by the time this game gets to the start. I think that's interesting too. But there are some dynamics you mentioned, like what happens if this game gets moved, like all those things that are really just hard to predict right now. So this is a tough one to kind of know exactly where to sit on it. But I'll pick the Rams. And one of the reasons, as I said, was because we had to have a different pick somewhere. So I'll pick the Rams on this one in the wild card round. But there you go. There are thoughts on the wild card games. Should be a fun slate, as we know. Even though some of these point spreads may suggest certain things, we know it's a wild card round. Wild things are going to happen. And of course, Dylan have it all covered over at Clutch Points with everything everyone needs to get them ready for the action, so that everybody know where they can find that.
You can go to clutchpoints.com, our NFL section at the top of the homepage. Yeah, tons of stuff breaking down the matchups here from a betting point of view, from just an X&O football point of view, all the injury news, latest, obviously coaching carousels we talked about in the last episode. Go listen to that if you haven't. Obviously, since then the Raiders have fired Antonio Pierce, so I'm sure we'll have more thoughts on the offseason, but nonetheless, anything NFL, go to the Clutch Points app, to the NFL section, also clutchpoints.com.
Yep, check it all out there, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast, any podcast app you use. Search for Establish the Pass, and thanks as always for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Establish the Pass podcast.